Let's crash into it, Dave. Welcome back to the piggery.
Yeah, episode 3.
Goes quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Fortnight flies by.
Yeah, it's 6 weeks. This will be, well, I suppose 4 weeks.
Yeah.
3 episodes, 2 weeks in between. Anyway, how are you?
Yeah,
good week?
Yeah, very good week. Very good week. I don't think my week's been as exciting as yours.
Oh, God, it's been hectic.
You've had a good week. Come on.
It's been a really good week. And hectic week with good news coming in on a Friday about, inshallah, fingers crossed, Nepal opening up for international travel from tomorrow morning, apparently.
So we're recording this, it's Friday the 16th of October, and this is going to go live on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So when this goes live, fingers
I
crossed.
should be in Kathmandu.
Fingers crossed, touch
But
wood.
there's a lot. So I don't know how many of the listeners, viewers have been to Nepal. Have you been to Nepal?
No, never.
I'm deeply in love with Nepal. I love so much about it, but the bureaucracy can drive one mad. And in the last few days, it's been a roller coaster of emotion. 2 days ago, Nepal looked like it wasn't going to open, and then there were some ridiculous regulations put on, which we were struggling to find solutions for. And then all of a sudden, from this morning, as is often the way, everything has just happened.
Yeah.
And permits have arrived by email. I've literally just sent a COVID test off.
I arrived to you and Jazz doing things and I don't know what I witnessed.
I think she was shoving a swab up my nose.
Yeah.
And hopefully that all comes through. I can go and see my friends in Nepal and get underway on an expedition. The first one since, proper expedition this year.
Wow. Can you tell us what you've got planned?
I've got 2 wonderful clients. First client is a lovely Indian man who lives in Dubai, British citizen, but called Anil, and we're off to climb Mera Peak in the Hinku, which is a neighbouring valley to the Khumbu, which is the valley that leads up to Everest. And it's a valley I've never been into.
Really?
It's a very popular trekking peak, but an area I've not been to, so I'm so excited. And then straight after that will be with Ardavan, and it's an Ahmadabad expedition. And the reason why I'm doing back-to-back is for a number of reasons. One is that there is a quarantine both front and end, so we're trying to avoid that a little bit. And of course it also helps with travel in terms of the environmental impact. I think during lockdown many of us have looked at our footprints, and certainly before lockdown mine was quite big, despite I champion the environment.
Yeah.
So 2 back-to-back expeditions, there's only 1 set of flights, obviously.
What do you do when you're climbing a mountain for the first time? Because if I'm going to climb a big mountain, I'm going to call you and hope that you'll take me on as one of your clients. But if you don't know where you're going,
navigating the unknown.
Yeah.
On something like Mera Peak, I would have my Sherpa team around me. I'll probably be working with Dorji Geljan, and he has climbed it numerous times. Yeah. But in theory, the qualification that any IFMGA mountain guide has enables the guide to come up to a mountain and climb it from bottom to top.
Right.
Relatively safely. And Mera Peak isn't a super technical mountain. It's quite high, 6,400 meters, but it's quite well frequented, albeit not in the last 7-8 months. So with a little guidance of my local friends and surveying the mountain and maps and books, you can generally find where you're supposed to go. So that should be really good. Should be really good. But it's been a mountain of paperwork. Been quite stressful. So that's today, and then of course, if anybody follows me on Instagram, you would have seen me
tearing around the countryside in a Land Rover.
Yeah. So it was the PR launch of the new Defender 90. So the shorter wheelbase of the two variants, and my association with Land Rover, which runs quite deep now, 7 or 8 years, I got invited with some journalists and another ambassador, Ed Stafford. I spent the best part of 2 days in a car with Ed, so thank you, Ed, for some fantastic chat. And yeah, it was really good to see what that car is capable of.
And what's it like?
I suppose I've got to say this, but beyond that, yeah, it's fantastic. And the platform for the 90 is the original platform for the Land Rover.
Okay.
And the short wheelbase does mean it can do one or two things that perhaps a longer wheelbase one can't, because of the shorter platform. On the test track, I had, and this is a production version. On the test track, I had it doing 130 miles an hour.
Wow.
Not that you ever need to do 130 miles an hour, but it's meant to be limited to 118. I don't quite know how I got to 130. And then the same car, minutes later, I have on gravel and mud, in mud ruts, hitting bumps at 60 miles an hour, and it takes it all in its stride. Quite remarkable, and with a level of comfort which is extraordinary.
Which the original Defender, as lovely as they are, and I'm a big fan of Land Rovers as well, but they're not comfortable to drive any long distance.
I think anybody at Land Rover would say the same thing. The older Defender, you got out after an hour, 2 hours, and you felt beaten up. Yeah. I've got a Series 2 outside, affectionately known as Didi, which is Nepalese sister. I bought it off a Gurkha officer, lovely man. It's got the crossed Kukuri knives on it, and it's painted in a sand colour. Doing the school run in that, you feel like you've just done a workout.
Yeah, I bet.
Obviously no power steering. It's 1958, so there's no power steering. The brakes are soft in comparison. Whereas a new one, it chews motorway miles as well as it would chew the off-road. And we took it through some proper off-road at East North.
So I guess the big question is, would you have one?
I currently have one in the drive.
Oh, yes, I noticed.
There is a 110.
Yeah, so, because you're a Discovery guy at the moment.
Currently in a Discovery, thank you, Land Rover. Currently in a Discovery, we're just about to put a new build in for a new Defender. Yeah, so the family are falling in love with it. Yeah. I'm not sure Otis has. It's a little bit higher, I think, for him to jump in. So Otis, the dog, is a little less enamoured at the moment. But it was a super couple of days. Hanging out with some of my Land Rover friends, and then there was Patrick.
Yeah, you told me about him. Yeah.
Yeah. So Patrick is the editor of Land Rover Monthly, and we were having a beer, and he just dropped. Well, that's right. We went running together.
Okay.
So we finished the first day. We overnighted in the hotel, and Patrick said, "Oh, what are you doing? You fancy going for a run?" And we banged out quite a quick 5K together just before dinner. And then over a beer, he just happens to drop into conversation that he once had an entry to Badwater.
Wow.
Which, if you don't know, it's 135 miles through Death Valley, finishing on top of Mount Whitney, which is a 14,000 foot peak. And it's considered one of the hardest foot races in the world. And there's Patrick, who I've known for probably about 3 or 4 years now. But I had no idea of his running prowess. He didn't do it in the end. He was meant to be doing it in conjunction with a sponsor. He pulled out last minute, but he had a crew all arranged. And yeah, he said he was devastated that he couldn't do it. I would say it's a lucky escape.
Yeah, because I've only watched documentaries on it, but running through Death Valley, your trainers, the soles of them melt.
Yeah, well, apparently people run on the white line.
Yeah, you have to, apparently, because that's the only way you stop your trainers.
I wouldn't be able to do that. I struggle to run in a straight line. When I'm tired. But no, so it's been a pretty phenomenal week.
Yeah, it's been a good week.
And the emotional roller coaster has been quite intense. 2 days ago, Nepal didn't look like it was going to open, and then today, fingers crossed, everything is lined up.
And it looks like things are, you don't want to tempt fate, and obviously we'll know when this goes out whether or not you've made it there, but it looks like things are opening up in Nepal because there's been a summit.
Yeah,
today.
Right.
Was it today or yesterday?
I think it was today.
Okay.
So So I don't quite know how this team has got round the paper protocol, shall we say, but it's a team from Bahrain, including one of the princes, I think, of Bahrain, which perhaps
That might help.
indicates how they got round the paperwork. But they summited Mount Manaslu, I think this morning. So it's Friday today, so Friday morning. And Mount Manaslu is the 10th highest mountain in the world. Or was it the 8th highest mountain? And I summited it back in 2010. And this would represent the first 8,000 metre peak summit this year.
Wow.
Which is almost unheard of. Honestly, with the exception of maybe 2015 when the earthquake, no, even 2015 there would have been summits in Pakistan. So this is probably the latest summit for an 8,000 metre peak since the early 50s when the French first climbed Annapurna.
70 years-ish.
So this would be the first, I think the first year with no pre-monsoon or summer. So the seasons are slightly different. So in Nepal and India, well, there are no 8,000 metre peaks in India, but if you're climbing in Nepal, India, or Tibet, you would climb post-monsoon and pre-monsoon.
Yeah.
So spring and autumn time. And then in Pakistan, the Karakoram, you're predominantly climbing the summer. And I would need to look at the records, but I wager that this is the latest summit in a year since the early 50s. Which is quite incredible. I hadn't really thought about that until just now.
That's mad, isn't
So it just shows the impact of a pandemic is not simply health and financial, but it impacts even sort of adventure sport.
And puts you back, not puts you back, but takes you back 70 years.
Yeah. So the French first climbed an 8,000 metre peak, classic book by Maurice Herzog called Annapurna, the Summit of Annapurna, in a remarkable tour de force. And it's a fantastic book, absolutely fantastic book. So that was, I'm going to get my years wrong, I think that was 1950. Was it 51? Should have done a bit of research, I think it was 50. And then obviously Everest was climbed in 53, and all the 8,000 metre peaks were climbed in the 50s. So all of them. And they've been climbed regularly ever since, until this year. Quite amazing.
So will someone stand on top of Everest this year?
No. Not now. So we're too late in the season.
Okay.
So there's no expeditions in for Everest this year. If anybody had gone to Everest, because logistically it's harder to put together. Manaslu is a comparatively easy 8,000 metre peak to climb, and I think this team from Bahrain are using Manaslu as a warm-up to Everest next spring, I think.
Okay, yeah.
But now it's too late in the season to put a Everest trip together, unless you're trying to climb it in winter, which is almost unheard of. It's only ever had one winter ascent, I think. So we're not going to see an Everest ascent this year.
And in 2015, there were summits, weren't there, of Everest? Not before?
No, there's no summits in 2015, no autumnal summit, no spring summit. Okay. So I summited 2016. So I was one of the first people to summit in 2016.
Gotcha. Okay.
With Rob Lucas. So the day after the fixing team. So yeah, so that's pretty big news out of Nepal. That there has been a summit. And Manaslu is one of those really interesting mountains where it's multiple summits, and it's actually quite difficult to work out what is the true summit. And 18 months ago, there was quite a lot on the social media about what represents a true ascent. And Manaslu was one of the mountains in question, as was Annapurna, Shushupangma, and there's always been a little bit of controversy over Choyoya as well, because that's got a fall summit.
I heard you and Greg talk about that as well, and you get sort of up and then you just got to
there's like a little nipple off to one side, which in bad weather you could mistake. And it actually looks more of a summit than the real summit. It's a big plateau.
Yeah.
And as you said before the show, I mean, there's no trig point up there to tell you where the summit is. But Manaslu's an interesting one because 10 years ago, 8 years ago, commercial teams first started to go to Manaslu, and a lot of them had decided that they would get to a shoulder and call that good for the summit, even though it was maybe 20, 30 metres lower and perhaps 60, 70 metres away from what looks like the true summit. When you get to what looks like the true summit, because I went there in 2010, which is a little bit rocky and definitely harder to get to, then from there's another peak just behind it, maybe another 20, 30 metres away, with a little dip down and then back up, which looks to be a similar sort of height. And I know it's ridiculous to say, well, which one is the true summit? So a number of people would say that the furthest peak is the true summit, and very, very few people go there because it's quite treacherous ground to get to. So Manaslu, as I said, comparatively easy until you get to the very, very top.
Which would be why people stop at the shoulder and
exactly
call it a day. But how do you feel about that as a professional climber?
Well, it calls into question lots of, but not many things. If you as an individual are happy with that, then that should be totally cool.
Yeah.
It becomes a little bit more questionable when you claim a summit if you haven't been there. So a very dear friend of mine, Iñaki, Spanish, well, he's from Catalonia, or was from Catalonia, lost his life on Annapurna. He once said that as a climber, you know when you've got to the summit. The summit is the point where there is no more up.
Yeah.
And it sounds, when you put it binary like that, there is no more up, that's the summit. I don't have an issue with somebody not getting to the summit, as long as they don't claim a summit. And we have seen false claims on Everest when people haven't even been to the summit. So Everest is no ambiguity, you know when you're on the summit of Everest. But some people have falsified summit photographs, believe it or not.
Really?
Quite famously, a couple of years ago, an Indian couple falsified summit photographs.
So had they been on the mountain?
They had been on an expedition to the mountain,
Yeah.
but they hadn't got particularly high. And then they were outed, and I think they'd been banned from Nepal. I think the Ministry of Tourism actually banned them from Nepal. And certainly retracted their summit certificate. And I think Iñaki had a really good slant on it. You know when you get to the summit or not. And if you don't get to the summit, if you get very high, say on the shoulder, and if you're down with that, that's groovy.
Yeah.
You know, that's okay. As long as you're honest about the point you got to. Because the only person you're actually cheating is yourself. I mean, mountaineering is one of those funny sports. There's no fame or fortune, or very little in mountaineering. So there's not much point to falsify a claim on a mountain. But yeah, it's an interesting one that there is some confusion over what is the true summit. And then Shishapangma is similar. Shishapangma is multiple summited. There's a west summit, there's a central summit. And it's not always obvious, especially in bad weather. And some people do make genuine mistakes.
Yeah, I get that. But I say all of this, having never been on a 8,000 or even 6,000 metre high mountain, but to get to a shoulder and then not push on, and I appreciate, I don't know what I'm talking about, but to not climb that additional 20, 30 metres, which might be really difficult, but for me to get that close and turn back, I don't know, feels almost like a wasted journey. Yeah,
it is more difficult and it can be a bit of a bottleneck. But yeah, I totally agree with you to a certain extent. So, as yet, I don't know where the Bahrain team got to. I would suspect with no other teams on the mountain, there would be no bottleneck going at least to the 4 summit. And as I say, there is some controversy whether it is the Four Summit or the summit behind. Some people have said, no, it's definitely the Four Summit is the real summit. And I think the Himalayan database, I need to check this, but I think the Himalayan database, if you claim what I'm calling the Four Summit, I think they give you a summit of Manaslu.
Okay, but it's definitely not the shoulder.
Oh, it's definitely not the shoulder, no. I mean, I can show you photographs, it's pretty obvious. It's not the shoulder.
Yeah.
And some people do caveat their ascent with, I climbed to the shoulder of Manaslu, which is still about 8,000 metres.
Yeah, which is an incredible achievement.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where the Bahrain team got to. And it'll be even more interesting if I get to meet them next week, how they got round all the paperwork, which thus far has thwarted me. Maybe I need a royal endorsement next time I go to Nepal.
Quite possibly. But, all being well, fingers crossed, touch wood, you'll be listening to this or watching this from the...
Let's not tempt fate.
Yeah, okay. Well, why don't you answer some questions then, if you're up for it?
Yeah. We've got some pretty good questions.
Yeah, we've got some great questions actually.
And yeah, thank you to everybody that does put time and energy into the questions.
Yeah.
At least some of the questions. I've seen which ones you're going to answer me today, and
I've got some really important questions to ask you on behalf of your listeners.
Maybe some more thoughts gone into some rather than
Yes. Yeah, well, let's start with a thoughtful one. Not that I'm suggesting not all of them haven't been thought about, but this is a more obvious, thoughtful question. This one comes from Suzanne Whitaker, and more from Suzanne a bit later in Cool Kids, but we'll come back to that. So Suzanne asks, how can we encourage the kids of today? How can we encourage them to respect the outdoors, but also use it to its full advantage? Also, we would like to get the kids up on the ice in the next couple of years, probably in the Alps. Where is the best place to take them? My husband and I have climbed some of the easier peaks in the Alps together without a guide, so have some mountaineering experience. So, quite a few questions there. First one, I guess.
Yeah, let's break it down.
Yeah.
I mean, fantastic that there's an engagement with the children. So that's to be saluted straight away. So let's do it in reverse order. Where to get children out and about in the Alps. And Susan, thanks for the question, and you're absolutely right. Much easier to get them into the snow and ice in the Alps than it is in this country. Scotland, which is a fantastic proving ground, it's really hard work and could put children off because there's a lot of effort, wind, rain. Whereas the Alps, especially in summertime, is a beautiful playground. So this year I went to the Alps with my children, who were 10 and 8, or at the time 10 and 7, and we took them up the Skyway lift in Italy, up to the Italian side of Mont Blanc, and it gets you very high very quickly, and you almost step out of the cable car straight into snow and ice, and it's fantastic. And there's 3 or 4 peaks in that area. You've got the Petit Flambé, Aiguille de Tula. Depending how old the children are, you could probably do like the easier route on the Aiguille de Marbury. And these are all quite amazing peaks.
Yeah.
But more than that, you are up in the high Alps. You're teaching on the edge of 4,000 meters. And certainly I went up there with my children and they were blown away by it. Absolutely blown away by it. They were more excited about the snowball fight we had than the climbing. But that was okay, and we had to rope them up.
Yeah.
And we had boots on. We didn't have crampons, but it was summer. Being a mountain guy, I deemed it. Anyway. And we just walked to the edge of the Tula Glacier and came back again. It was as simple as that. And then we had a hot chocolate in the Torino hut. We were thinking about overnighting in the Torino hut, but it does get a little bit expensive because you've got to get the cable car up there in the first place. But you can get a family ticket, which makes it a little bit more affordable. So that's a really good starting place. So that's above Courmayeur. The other place I would highly recommend, and I go here quite a lot with clients all the time, and I have been with Saffron when she was quite a bit younger, is it's in Switzerland. It's known as the Sasstal. So Sassgrund, Sassfey area. There's some really good uplift, so cable cars, and there's which can get you up onto the snow and ice quite quickly. And there's a, what do you call it? The Alpine Express. It's a cable car, and then it's a train that again gets you up really high. And depending on the age of the children, you could go and climb Alpha, which is sometimes called the easiest 4,000 meter peak in the Alps. You know, I think I would do it with my children now.
Okay.
You know, even the youngest Willoughby, who's 8, there'll probably be a little bit of moaning, but you would have to rope up, and then crampons would be needed for that, and go around and climb the Leenenhorn. And with the use of the uplift, there's not the big long walks to get into that environment. I really like the Sassdown area, so I would definitely look at those. Other places you could look at is Grindelwald, above Grindelwald, and Bernese Oberland, but a train to get up to the glacier is a bit prohibitively expensive. It's fantastic, but it is quite expensive. So yeah, I'd look at those areas. And certainly my children had a blast, absolute blast, if only for the snowballs.
Yeah. And Suzanne's question about how do we encourage kids to respect the outdoors but get full advantage from it?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. So I read this the other day when you sent it through, Dave, and I was thinking about it. And something that we did as a family last year or year before now, we did a litter pick. So we live in the countryside in Gloucestershire, and we had noticed on the school run there's a small lane that we drive along, and there was quite a lot of litter on it. And it is only, I've never fully worked out why there is so much litter on this very small, narrow road, but there is. So one day I phoned up a neighbouring, he's a farmer actually, Nick Phillips, and we invited his son along as well, and I got a load of bin bags. We went and parked the car up, and the 4 of us, 3 children and me, we did a litter pick. And the effect of that was quite profound, because all of a sudden, not only are they in the outdoors, they're picking up all sorts of rubbish. You know, I mean, you've got to be a little bit careful what you're picking up. And we filled, I think, 5 or 6, maybe even 7 bags of rubbish from this very narrow lane, not far from us. And the children were outside enjoying themselves, believe it or not. They thought it was really good. Who can fill the most bags? We did have some half-filled bags being passed off as a full bag. But it became a competition, which the children really liked. They were working together, they were outside. But more than any of that, afterwards they became really quite protective of their little lane. And whenever we saw any litter afterwards, they became enraged. And they got really quite upset. And then Nick's son, little Freddie, was asking when we can do it again. You know, when can we get out again and do the litter pick? And as a family, we did it a few weeks later, a bit further along the lane with another school friend. And again, that other school friend became quite invested in this was their lane, and they would look after it.
I love it.
So that worked really well for us. That worked really, really well. And that's not going to the big mountains, it's not having to travel very far away, it's literally on your doorstep. And the really disappointing thing is, we mentioned it only a couple of weeks ago. We were driving back from school, and Saffron was gazing out the window, and the lane is covered in litter again. 2 years later. It's unfathomable. Yeah. And the top tip actually for Susan is, you want to be doing that sort of litter pick about now onwards, when all the foliage starts to die off a little bit. Because in the summertime everything grows up and you can't get to some of the litter. Whereas now it's easier to see. And just be a little bit careful, because there is all sorts of stuff in the rubbish. So you don't want the children getting covered in crap. Technical problems.
Technical. No, so I was saying, how do you keep your cool when you know that there is a real consequence to you making a mistake? Yeah,
so I mean, it's quite an interesting one. So that comes down to perhaps a difference between a fear and being scared. So fear, I always think, is something in the future, which perhaps you have very little control over. Being scared is in the moment, and the danger comes through being unable to control your emotion when you are scared. Especially if you're, say, ice climbing or rock climbing or mixed climbing or whatever it is you're doing. Because if you start burning through that emotional energy through being scared, you're not necessarily making those instinctive decisions, or at least not making correct ones. And you can start potentially snatching at moves and making mistakes. So you've got to be very, very careful at trying to keep that emotional side of things, which can push you into the arena of making a mistake. You've got to try and keep that controlled, i.e. you've got to keep your cool. And one of the ways that I deal with that is to try to put all emotion to one side of my brain and just try to lean on the logical part of my decision making. And that's not that easy. You've got to train yourself a little bit through experiencing things and getting yourself into these situations and learning by experience. David Goggins calls it the cookie jar. And when you get into these situations, you have the experience and you can dip into the cookie jar and pull them out. But you're absolutely right. You can get yourself, and I've been there. You get yourself into situations, you get flustered, you start making poor choices, quick poor choices. Perhaps if you're rock climbing and you're getting tired and you're looking at a sequence and you think the sequence is like this and it turns out to be an incorrect sequence and you have to come back down and you get more flustered and then you start to rush things and the fear starts kicking in. All of a sudden you start compounding the mistake. You've got to try to calm things down a little bit, look at it rationally and logically, and then approach what the problem is. And all the time just try to keep the lid on the emotion. But it's not always easy, and I hold my hand. I've fluffed it a few times. I've had some in North Wales once. I was coming back from an injury. I jumped on a relatively hard route, and I was looking at this difficult sequence, and it looked quite hard. And I convinced myself that the climb went somewhere else. So it was a climb called Electric Blue. It's an E4, not super hard. And it climbs along the lip of an arch or a big cave and then goes straight up. And I was looking straight up. There's one moderately hard move from the lip straight up, and I was quite tired because I hadn't been climbing. And I attempted the move, couldn't do it first time, got flustered, and let the emotion start to run, thinking, what if? Looked to my right, it looked easier. So I started to quest off the route, got super high on loose ground because it's not travelled so much, and got very, very close to the top on some horrendous rock, no gear because I'm off the route. In the end, was so exhausted and tired, I fell off. And I ended up hitting the sea from about 70 feet on rope stretch. Because I convinced myself, because I let emotion take over, it taking me off to one side. I knew where the route went. It went straight up. But I convinced myself, because I let emotion run away, that it was off to the right, and it wasn't. I got away with it by the skin of my teeth. And then a couple of years later I went back, because it's a classic solo, because it's above the sea, you do it at the right time, you can fall off into the sea, no problem. I came back about 2 or 3 years later and soloed it and found it easy. Because I had the confidence. Because I was returning from injury when I tried it. And that's a classic example of losing your cool and then letting emotion make the wrong, illogical decisions for you. So I'm a big fan of keeping things logical.
I also love how you've learned to categorise what the differences between being scared and being fearful, or I'm scared right now. Fear is something that's in the future, and
absolutely.
I need to park that potentially. And if I'm scared, fine, but know that that moment will pass. And I'm guessing, therefore, you can manage fear with practice, like you say.
I think so. And the other thing is, you did your 24-hour race, 24-hour run a couple of weeks ago. In the build-up to that, you wouldn't have been scared.
No.
Perhaps there was a modicum of fear.
Yeah.
In how's my body going to cope? What are my peers going to think? Which is a little bit related to ego, potentially. I'm not saying you have an ego.
No,
is my nutrition going to be? I mean, that's all. It's all worry, which is linked to fear. And to a certain extent, we can control that by good planning. Being scared is something a little bit different, because you are facing. I was going to say you're facing a fearful situation, but generally being scared, you are in a situation which presents danger, and that's where we feel the emotion of being scared. And certainly in climbing, that can cause some quite nasty consequences if we don't keep that boxed. And it's practice. I think you just got to practice it.
Good question from Harvo. Another question from Pat, and by the way, Kenton, there are 3 killer questions still to cover. Not that Pat's isn't an important question. Pat Hartwell asks, where would you recommend learning to ice climb for a complete beginner? Now, I'm going to make the assumption that Pat is an adult, not a child, so I don't know if that's a slightly different answer to your answer to Suzanne's question earlier about taking the kids to the Alps.
Yeah, I think, so let's go on the assumption that Pat's talking about ice climbing, so 2 ice axes and climbing a frozen waterfall. I think Susan was looking at more getting the children out onto a glacier, up onto the snow, onto the ice like I did with my children. So if we look at ice climbing, 2 places I would immediately recommend. One is, in Europe anyway, one is Norway, a place called Rjukan. It's not quite purpose-built, but it's a dark valley, and not far from where they used to have the heavy water plant. The Germans had the heavy water plant. And it's a sort of deep gash valley with numerous ice climbs, with super easy access, almost zero avalanche risk, with sort of good infrastructure, hostels to stay at, and you can get guides and things there. So that's one place to go. Or my personal favourite, and I'm a bit biased because I love the country, is in Italy. And it's a place called Konya, which isn't that far from Courmayeur. Or you can base yourself, in a normal world, you can base yourself in, say, Chamonix, and you can go through the Mont Blanc tunnel. So you can fly to Geneva, or you can fly to Milan or Turin. And Konya is in the Gran Paradiso National Park, 2 parallel valleys, it's all natural ice, and it's probably the most reliable ice in mainland Europe. Comes into condition quite early, stays quite late, and there's ice on both sides of the valley, so you can get out the sun, because you don't really want to be climbing ice in the sun, because sun affects ice, obviously. So you can sort of, if it's really cold, you can be in the sun. Late season, you can climb on the darker side. Some fantastically beautiful accommodation. And having a car is useful there, but you can pick up a hire car and things like that. And all sorts of grades, from super easy through to some relatively hard stuff. And it's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. You see lots of wildlife, bocatan, chamois. There's nesting raptors and all sorts of things there. So it's...
You do love it, don't you?
I love Konya. I didn't go this year. First year in 15, 20 years, I didn't go. And the food is great, the people are great.
Stop it.
The coffee is great. And it's Italy, and it's pretty cheap. Norway
isn't cheap, is it?
Yeah, it can be expensive. But the ice climbing in Norway is off the charts good. Konya is off the charts good as well. If you put a gun to my head, if you're a beginner, I'd probably choose Konya.
Okay.
Yeah, it's normally a bit warmer, and it's just beautiful. It's simply beautiful.
And there's pizza.
Oh, it's just does it do pizza? Oh my goodness.
It's all there, isn't it?
It's all there. Yeah, fantastic coffee for about €1. I mean, my favourite coffee shop in the world is in Konya, and before I was plant-based, it is without doubt a non-negotiable. And you can email or you can let us know your thoughts on this. The best hot chocolate I've ever had.
Wow. Okay.
You can stand your spoon up in it. It's that amazing. We used to have one of those before we go climbing. It's fantastic. Yeah, Konya, Cogne.
Nice. Pat, awesome question, and thank you very much for making Kenton reminisce and persuade us all that that's where we want to holiday next year. Right, 3 more questions and then Cool Kids.
I'm quite excited about Cool Kids.
Yeah, Cool Kids is a good one.
Cool Kids is going this week, and it's pretty fun.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. But first, 3 questions. And I'm going to change one word because this is a family show, but I've got down TNL wants to know this. What's the best view you've ever had whilst taking, a wee? These are the big questions, aren't they? These are the important questions that everybody wants to answer.
They are. So there's a couple of places which have been standout. I know, ridiculous about. I mean, it's so funny. I do quite a lot. I used to do quite a lot of school talks, and I love speaking to small children because they've got no inhibitions. And some of the questions are fantastic, but invariably you do get asked about how do you go to the toilet when you're in your big down suit.
Yeah.
So pretty much anywhere in the Himalayas is generally a pretty amazing view for going to the loo. But there's a couple of places that stand out. One is there's a fantastic loo at the top of Val d'Isère.
Is it?
Yeah, in the ski lift area. So they built a new chair lift up the Solaire's lift, and if you are lucky enough to go there skiing, go into the loo where the Solaire's lift is, and if you're a guy or a girl, because apparently it's the same, there is a long landscape sort of style window, and if you look out of there, the view is sensational.
Wow.
Absolutely, to the extent that when I was in there, I took a photograph of the view. It was simply unreal. I mean, absolutely amazing. So that's one. Number 2 would be, and I forget exactly where, it's another ski resort, and it was Snowbird. And I went for lunch with some clients, and it was at the bottom of the lift system. And I forget exactly, but it's pretty much in Snowbird. There's a little area that everybody gathers, and the main gondola goes from there. And there's an eatery, as the Americans would call it. And down in there we had lunch, and I remember going to the loo, and the loo's actually got a full length window, believe it or not. A 6 foot high window, and it looks down an amazing, I suppose Americans probably call it a gulch, it's a small stream at the bottom and really relatively steep side, and there's loads of aspen trees either side, and at the time it was covered in snow. And again, I took a photograph. I was so amazed at this vista while going to the loo. I took a photograph, and it was unreal, absolutely unreal. And both are incredibly accessible. Yep. Now, you don't need to be in the deep mountains to get this view. Oh, there's one other actually, and it's in Tibet, Chinese Tibet, and I think it's in Tingri. And for some reason, the loo was on top of the hostel hotel we're staying in. And this is where you would go for a number 2. So you had to go up these old concrete steps, and you come around, and it was a drop loo. So you had to squat, and there was a wall maybe 2.5, 3 feet high all the way around, and so it's in the open air, and you squat down, and right in front of you, because you're in the open air, right in front of you, you've got the Himalayas.
Wow.
Because we were on the Tibetan plateau, so we were about 5,500 meters on the Tibetan plateau, and south of the Tibetan plateau are Choya and Everest. So this represents the northern part of the Himalayas. So the Tibetan plateau signifies the end of the Himalayas as such. It's still very high terrain, but it all flattens out after that. And I was looking south, and there was this amazing vista, and they're probably about 20 miles away, the mountains, and it was crystal clear, and they were just there. And you are squatting in an open air loo. So if you take away all the other nasty things around, especially the drop loo itself, the vista there was unreal. Absolutely unreal.
Well, I think I can speak on behalf of all of the listeners. I can't wait for the second book, The World's Best Wheeze, from Kenton Cool. You've got quite a story to tell.
Yeah, there is a book somewhere. God, where did I say? There is a book somewhere like the best water closets in the world. Yeah, and it's exactly this. And one of them was in Alaska. There's a place in Alaska.
How do you know so much about this?
And there's one in Alaska somewhere, and it's this amazing. Looks like a cupboard, and it's I presume it's a drop loo. I've not been there, and you can only access it by ski plane. So there must be some other infrastructure there anyway. And it's there, and it's amazing. There's a whole picture book of the best water closet, for want of a better word, loo, loo with a view.
Wow. Well.
Yeah, I might try and find that. It'd be a good thing to put in the loo.
Yeah, it would actually. Good question from TNL then. And next question, I don't know who asked this question. I'm going to put it out that it might be Guy or it might be your wife Jazz, but they both say it wasn't. The question is, why is your wife funnier than you?
Well, she's cleverer than I am for a start. Why is Jazz funnier than me? Well, that's a good question. Yeah, she did an Instagram takeover, I say a few weeks ago.
It was so good.
A few months ago now. And she essentially impersonated me.
Yeah, very well actually.
With my Get It Done, and Otis hiding in the, she'd been for a run herself. And she got my mannerisms totally right. And that had more engagement than any single social media post I've ever done. Brilliant. And yeah, she just nailed it. She simply nailed it. So I'm assuming that it might be relating to that. But she's funnier than I am. She's definitely more intelligent than me. And I think if you want to be funny, you need to be quick-witted. And Jazz is definitely quick-witted. So why is she funnier than me? I think I would have to say because she's cleverer than I am.
Big admission.
Wow.
But no one's arguing.
I'm being honest. Yeah, no one's arguing. I'm being honest. Yeah, I'm being honest. So I don't know who. So we don't know who.
Yeah.
Well, it's an astute question.
Yeah, and apparently it wasn't our mate Guy, and it wasn't Jazz. So whoever you were, good question, and thank you for asking it.
But she is funnier than I am. In fact, she's so funny I don't pick up on it sometimes.
And the next question,
sharp.
We do know who it's from. So this is from Alex Parker, and I think Alex asks one of the most pressing questions of the human race, actually. If you had to be a crow or a seagull, what would you be and why? It's a big question.
Crow or seagull?
Yeah, they're your choices.
Well, neither are particularly liked, aren't they?
No.
Do you think Alex is trying to tell me something?
No, I think he's posed a question that...
Could it be an albatross?
It's not on the list. That could be your answer. I'd say a crow is more liked than a seagull.
Really?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, don't get me wrong, as you said,
they're both carrion birds, are they not? I mean, crow's definitely a carrion bird.
Yeah, but seagulls are just dreadful. I mean, I know crows aren't.
Crows aren't great.
No, I know.
So we climbed the old man of Hawaii a couple of weeks ago. Well, actually, I climbed a couple of weeks ago, and then back in July. When we climbed in July, there were a lot of nesting seabirds. And there's quite a lot of because they're reformers,
Mm.
which isn't technically a seagull, but it's very close to a seagull. And they have a tendency to vomit on you. So they regurgitate this horrible stuff and then spit it at you.
Charming.
It smells disgusting and it's almost impossible to get out of your clothing. So you pull onto a ledge and there'll be a little chick in a nest, and then they start spitting this green bile at you. So that was the biggest danger of the climb, really.
This has got you, hasn't it? This is, I mean, ask you
Well,
a question on toilets. So
if you're a seagull, you get a sea view.
Yeah, you do. And I guess, if you're a seagull and you...
Crows get shot quite a bit by farmers.
They do, and actually, isn't it against the law to shoot a seagull? I may have just made that up. But I think it's against the law to...
I think morally it's kind of wrong to shoot any.
Yeah. But I think if you were a seagull in, say, St Ives in Cornwall, life would be pretty good.
There'd be lots of fish and chips.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd go crow because I don't like seagulls. But maybe actually being a seagull would be better than being a crow.
I go seagull, just because you've gone crow.
Yeah.
What was that piece of philosophy that Eric Cantona said? Do you remember about the seagulls following the trawler? Something like I can't remember.
Yeah. They're dreadful, dreadful creatures. But Alex, thank you for that question. And as ever, if you do have questions,
random question, isn't it?
yeah, it's pretty random. It sort of reminds me of would you rather have horses' hooves for feet or hands? It's that sort of school-like bus journey question that we used to ask ourselves 20, 30 years ago driving.
I'll tell you something, we're going off on a slight tangent. Something because I've just finished reading Born to Run.
Yeah.
Have you read that?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Very, very interesting chapter about how we as humans can run down pretty much any animal.
Yeah.
And the reason why I remember it is because you mentioned horses, and there's a race in America which is over 50 miles, I think, 50 quite testing miles. And invariably a human being will beat a horse over that distance.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to a human can breathe multiple times per stride, and animals can't.
And I appreciate, most of us can't, but back in the day, hundreds of thousands of years ago, I think, seemingly we were able to run for days, not without stopping, but
you did that last week.
Yeah, hunt down something, because you would just, like you say, you would run it into exhaustion, and that's when you would.
Yeah, but they were saying in the book, some university professor, kind of worked out as long as you could keep. He was using an antelope as an example. As long as you could keep the antelope in sight, you would run it down 10 to 15 kilometres.
Yeah,
because they can't, because the antelope will run off very quickly, go into oxygen debt, not be able to recover properly, then you come trotting over the hillside, off it will sprint again. It's got no jog mode as such. Whereas a human would be in jog mode, we're not going into oxygen debt, and then after a while the antelope just collapse. As long as you can keep it in view, we can run them down. It was a fascinating read, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Really enjoyed it. Born to Run.
And it sort of gave birth to the explosion of the barefoot running, didn't it?
I think I'm a little way off that.
Well, I'm wearing barefoot shoes at the moment.
I saw that.
I can't run in them. Well, I can, but it causes me quite a lot of.
Well, it's really interesting. So I was chatting to Ed Stafford about this, the guy that I was on the Land Rover trip with, because he's an ambassador for Vivo Barefoot.
Okay.
And he said, rule of thumb for the Vivos is if you can properly squat, i.e. all the way down onto your heels, and your bum basically touching the floor, you can run in Vivos. If you can't do that, you're not in a position to start trying to run. And I tried it the other day, and I don't know if it's because of the metal work I have in my heels and my ankles and things like that, but I was really struggling to keep balance. I was hunching over with my shoulders to try to keep balance, and if I was trying to keep it back straight, I would roll over backwards. Okay. So I was really struggling to do it, but really interesting. To try it at home,
try it afterwards.
Try and properly deep squat, sit on your haunches.
Yeah.
Can you hold that position? And that was Ed's little.
Okay.
If you can do that, you should be able to run in Vivo barefoots.
Right.
But then take it a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I think that's the thing you have to do as well, isn't it? It's you go out for 1 kilometre, you don't run 10k.
Yeah. I think it's a learning curve.
Yeah. I'll give it a go. So thank you very much for your questions. As ever, you can email them thecoolconversations@gmail.com.
Dave, I think it'd be a mistake being a crow.
I don't want to be a seagull now because you're a seagull, so I'm stuck with being a crow. I'm just slightly worried that your farmer mate down the road is going to blow me out of the sky. Yeah, you're probably right. I think it's my hatred for seagulls that makes me not want to be a seagull.
Why don't you like seagulls?
Who likes seagulls? They're dreadful, dreadful, dreadful animals, creatures. Horrible.
I think a bit harsh.
So are crows.
Anyway. Yeah.
Anyway, so email your questions to thecoolconversations@gmail.com. You can pester Kenton on
Yeah,
Instagram.
social media, hit me up.
We've also got our own Instagram account, which is The Cool Conversations, so you can send us questions there. And we're working through them slowly, so I know people have asked questions and we haven't been able to answer them yet, but we are working through them slowly. So
there's only 2 of us, give us time.
yeah, bear with us. And he's about to leave the country for who knows how many months.
And Dave's way better. I've got a document, anyway. Dave does all the hard work.
I do the admin. Cool Kids nominations. So this was born out of Saffron doing her 50k in September, raising money for a worthy local charity that helps the homeless.
The big yellow bus.
The big yellow bus. And we wanted to take the opportunity, should we be afforded to do it, to shout out other young people doing awesome things. So we came up with Cool Kids, didn't we? And we've got our first 2 Cool Kids nominations.
Yeah, this is I'm just bringing them up actually.
Yeah, so this is awesome. So shall I go through it?
Absolutely.
So this is from Suzanne Whitaker, who we answered one of her questions earlier. So this is Suzanne's nominations. She says she wants to big up her 2 boys, William and Thomas, aged 10 and 7, who at the end of the summer spent their first week in the Lake District. They managed to walk over 80 kilometres, including ascents of Blencathro, is that right?
Blencathro, yeah.
Via Sharp Edge and Helvellyn via Striding Edge and Swirl Edge. During lockdown, they had to cope with their mum and dad dragging them out every day on their daily walk. This obviously helped as they pretty much ran up the peaks. Fair play. They live in Chichester, which is pretty flat, let's be honest, except for the South Downs. So they don't think that they quite understand the achievement because they just didn't have the opportunity to practice on the mountains. They are both into climbing at their local indoor climbing wall, and William, who is 10 years old, has been leading indoors for a year now. William has dyspraxia, which affects coordination and processing speed, but climbing seems to focus his mind, kind of back to what you were talking about earlier, getting in the zone and focusing, and enables him to concentrate on one movement at a time. Susan says she's sure the boys would love a shout out and consider this.
No, absolutely. Hey, I mean, William and Thomas, that's epic.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't climb my first mountain until I was, it was Mount Manaslu, and I was about 15. So, I mean, going up Sharp Edge on Blencathro, I mean, that's pretty special. To spend a week in the Lake District, I hope the weather was good. The weather around that period was fantastic. Helvellyn, possibly my favourite mountain in the Lake District. 2 fantastic ridges that they've done there. It's brilliant. Absolutely. Really impressed. So I don't know who's 7, but that's one of the most incredible things I've heard recently, Dave.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed with that. I totally get it. We live in Chichester, so it's pretty flat around here. It's same here. In the Cotswolds, we're pretty flat. Chichester, isn't that where? I want to say, was it Robert Knox Johnson or somebody lived in Chichester? And then the guy that sailed around the world, first person to sail around the world single-handedly.
I don't know. The only fun fact I have about Chichester is the company that I used to work for used to own a radio station there.
Is this going to be fun? Is this actually a fun fact?
It's not really a fun fact. It's about the only
It's a
thing.
fact.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should get a sailor on. We should get a sailor on Cool Conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe it could be Jan, she has sailed around the world. But anyway, we are digressing. William Thomas, we've said it before, I'll say it again, massively impressed by that. And Susanna, thank you for putting that in. And yeah, really impressed. The boys are doing their indoor climbing.
Yeah.
So if you haven't signed up, sign up to NICAS, the National Indoor Climbing Award Scheme, I think it is.
Okay.
I'm technically a patron. And it's a really good way of keeping young people's interest, going through the different phases of going down your local climbing wall. So just ask at your local climbing wall, they should know all about NICAS, and that you get sort of trained up and you get to a certain stage and then you can progress to the next level until you're sort of competent to take your climbing outside. Okay. So yeah, lots of ticks on that all round. So
yeah. So William and Thomas, you can tell NICAS that Kenton Cool sent you, which is pretty cool. So I do that, guys. I just say, yeah, Kenton sent us. And yeah, well done. And so we're going to try and do this from, me at home and you in Nepal.
Oh, next week or next time.
Yeah, next time.
Yeah, so
who knows how that's going to work.
No, it's going to work really well. So fingers crossed, I will be going to Nepal, as we mentioned, on Monday. Mm-hmm. Really hope this happens. And we are adamant that we're going to keep some form of cool conversations going. Whether it's me doing little short interviews with people that I meet along the trail, so some of my Sherpa friends or other climbers that we meet and we collate something like that. But I also think as long as the listeners give us a little bit of leeway in the way that we do it, maybe we can dial in or I don't quite know how we'll do it, but I see no reason why we can't keep it going when I'm in Nepal and you're
at home.
You're at home. Don't say it like that.
No, definitely. So do keep the questions
coming. You make me feel bad now.
No. I think everyone's excited to hear what you get up to, and I think we talked about it previously, haven't we? You're talking to people on the trail, in the mountains. You bump into some pretty interesting people. So I think the more you can share that with us, the better. So we'll be checking in with you regularly, and if people listening have questions, maybe toilet related, maybe bird, of the flying variety related, whatever the question, we'd love to.
Yeah, we can try that, because assuming I get to Nepal, I got a 7-day quarantine to start with, so I'll be kicking my heels in a hotel somewhere, something I've never experienced before. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. Any tips for listeners or viewers? I'm all over what to fill my time with.
So you literally have to stay in the hotel for 7 days?
Looks like it, yeah. So I'm trying to pick a hotel with a good gym.
Yeah, I was going to say,
or maybe I can run up and down the stairs. I don't know. Training tips for hotels. All would be welcomed.
Cool.
So hopefully the next time we do this, we won't be sat in my unfurnished study.
No.
So one or two people ask, why it's so echoey. It's because we have no furniture in here, and we have no carpet in here,
but other than
and no soundproofing in here, because we are kind of winging it and learning as we go.
But that's not important. It's what we're talking about that's important.
Yeah, I like to think so. And as ever, listeners, viewers, let us know what works.
Yeah.
Give us some hot topics, things that we can research and talk about. We'd love to hear from you.
Definitely.
Tell us what works, tell us what's not working.
Another episode done?
Well, it's not uploaded yet. It's not done until it's uploaded and the listeners listen to it.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's not get ahead of ourselves, Dave.
If you're listening to this, we got it done.
We certainly did get it done. Thank you once again for joining us. Thank you, Dave, for all your hard work behind the scenes. And
be safe, my friend. Be safe.
We see you soon.
Yeah. Take care.